For decades, it was a shadow war, fought with spies, cyber attacks, and proxies. But now, it has exploded into the open. The long-simmering conflict between Iran and Israel has hit a terrifying new stage: direct, state-on-state confrontation. So, the big question is, how on earth did we get here? Let's break it all down.
Picture this. It's the night of October 1st. The sky over Israel isn't filled with stars. It's filled with streaks of fire. And no, this wasn't some meteor shower. It was a barrage. Over 180 ballistic missiles launched directly from Iran, tearing across more than 1,000 kilometers of airspace, all heading for one target: Israel.
And right after the attack, two completely different stories started to emerge. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, they claimed it was a massive success. They said over 90% of their missiles hit their targets. But Israel? They told a very different story, claiming their super sophisticated air defense systems knocked the vast majority of them right out of the sky.
But, this was no phantom attack. The impact was very real, and it was visible. Photos started coming out showing the sheer destructive power of the missiles that actually got through. We're talking about a massive, 30-foot-deep crater gouged into the earth right outside the headquarters of Mossad, Israel's own intelligence agency. Other missiles slammed into a large military base down in the Negev desert.
Well, the response from Israel's prime minister was, as you'd expect, swift and totally uncompromising. Benjamin Netanyahu came out and said that Iran had made a grave error, that they had seriously miscalculated. And his words weren't just a statement, they were a promise of retaliation. He was setting the stage for the next move in this incredibly deadly chess game.
So this really is the crucial question, isn't it? How did we get to this point? I mean, for years, this has been a fight in the shadows. Now we're seeing ballistic missiles flying openly between two countries. What sequence of events could possibly push a decades-long rivalry right over the brink like this?
So in this explainer, we're going to unravel this whole complex story. We'll start with the night of fire that kicked off this latest crisis. Then, we're going to look at the incredible tech behind Israel's defensive shield and the powerful axis of resistance that Iran commands. We'll also dive into the larger shadow war, count down the final events that led to this confrontation, and finally, try to understand why this has put the entire world on edge.
All right, let's dive into Chapter 1, Night of Fire. Now, while that October 1st attack felt like a massive, shocking escalation, the really interesting thing is, it wasn't the first time this year that Iran launched a direct assault on Israel. To really get what happened that night, we actually have to rewind the clock a few months.
Back on April 13th, an even bigger barrage was unleashed. That attack involved over 300 projectiles, a mix of about 170 drones, 30 cruise missiles, and 110 ballistic missiles. So when you look at the sheer numbers and the complexity, the April attack was actually the bigger deal. And it marked the first direct state-on-state attack on Israel in decades.
So, naturally, you have to ask the next question. If the October attack was retaliation, what was the April attack retaliation for? Because in this conflict, it seems like every single action is just a reaction to a previous one. So what was the spark that lit that first fire?
Well, Iran's April assault was a direct response to something that happened just 2 weeks earlier. On April 1st, an Israeli airstrike hit the Iranian embassy compound in Damascus, Syria. It was a precise, devastating strike that killed 7 Iranian military officers, including a top general. For Iran, an attack on its embassy is an attack on its own sovereign soil. It's an act of war that demanded revenge.
Okay, so you have these massive attacks. How do you possibly defend against something like that? That brings us to Chapter 2. We're going to look at the anatomy of Israel's multi-layered, technologically mind-blowing, and just staggeringly expensive shield against airborne threats.
So, the most famous layer of this whole defense system is, of course, the Iron Dome. It's designed to stop short-range threats, things like the thousands of pretty basic rockets fired by groups like Hamas. It basically creates a protective bubble over cities with a range of about 70 kilometers. It shoots its own missiles up to blow up the incoming ones in midair before they can hit anything.
But what about the more advanced stuff, the missiles coming from much farther away? Well, that's where the next layer, David's Sling, comes in. It fills a really crucial gap in the defense, taking out sophisticated cruise and ballistic missiles from up to 300 kilometers away. This is the system that handles the threats the Iron Dome just can't reach.
And this brings us to the top tier, the Arrow 3 system. And honestly, this is straight-up science fiction made real. It's designed to take out long-range ballistic missiles, the exact kind Iran launched, from an incredible 2,400 kilometers away. But here's the wild part.
It strikes its targets outside the Earth's atmosphere. It literally destroys them in the vacuum of space.
So this all sounds impenetrable, right? Like Israel has this invincible shield, but every single system has a weakness. And for this one, the Achilles heel isn't the technology, it's the money. So what is the absolutely astronomical cost of this kind of protection?
Just take a look at these numbers. It's kind of mind-blowing. Every time the Iron Dome fires one of its Tamir interceptors, it costs around $50,000. For David's sling, a single interceptor costs a cool $1 million. And for the Arrow system, we're talking several $1 million for one shot. To put that into perspective, just defending against that one Iranian attack back in April cost Israel an estimated $200 million. That's for a single day of defense. This isn't just about having enough missiles, it's about whether you can even afford to fire them. And this sets up the whole game, right? It's a war of attrition. Israel has this amazingly superior defense, but it's financially crippling. Iran's strategy, on the other hand, is all about quantity and lower cost. The key thing to realize here is that Iran doesn't have to win militarily, they just have to make defending so ridiculously expensive that they win economically. They can just overwhelm the system. Which brings us to Chapter 3. See, this isn't just a fight between two countries. Iran has spent decades building this powerful network of allies and proxy forces all across the region. It allows them to project power and fight wars without fighting directly. It's what's known as the axis of resistance. The main players in this network are Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Houthis in Yemen. It's pretty straightforward. Iran gives them money, training, and weapons. In return, these groups basically act as an extension of Iranian foreign policy, fighting its enemies and pushing its agenda, all while giving Iran what's called plausible deniability.
Now, Hezbollah is maybe the most powerful non-state army in the world. Seriously, it was founded back in 1982 with Iran's help, and it has since grown into this huge political and military force that's actually stronger than the official Lebanese army. It's deeply woven into Lebanese society, it fought Israel to a bloody stalemate back in 2006, and it's still Israel's most immediate and powerful threat.
And then you've got the Houthis in Yemen. They started as a religious movement in the 90s, but they've turned into a major regional power. Backed by Iran, they control a big part of Yemen, and they've become famous, or infamous, for attacking commercial ships in the Red Sea. That's a critical artery for global trade, so they've shown they can mess with the entire world economy. Okay, let's move to Chapter 4 and zoom out a bit. All these proxy fights, they aren't random. They are all just moves on a much larger geopolitical chessboard. The real contest here is a decades-long struggle for who will dominate the Middle East, a shadow war between two regional superpowers.
At its core, this is a huge rivalry between Shia-led Iran and Sunni-led Saudi Arabia, and this table shows you the divide perfectly. You can see the opposing alliances. Iran sides with Russia and China, while Saudi Arabia is a major partner for the US and the West. And this rivalry plays out everywhere, in Yemen, Iraq, Syria. Each power backs the opposing side, which just fuels more instability and conflict.
So, with all that as background, let's go to Chapter 5 and get back to our timeline. How did this massive, complex shadow war suddenly just snap into direct confrontation? Well, a really rapid series of events in the late summer and fall basically lit the final fuse. They pushed everyone past the point of no return.
Just look at this timeline. The speed of the escalation is just breathtaking. It starts on July 31st, when the Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh is assassinated in Iran's own capital. Then in September, a wave of attacks hits Hezbollah. Exploding pagers take out thousands of their fighters, their special ops commander is killed, and then, on September 27th, their supreme leader, Hassan Nasrallah, is killed. With its top proxies being taken apart piece by piece, Iran felt it had to respond directly. 4 days later, the missiles flew. And that brings us to Chapter 6, the aftermath. Iran's direct attack completely shattered the unwritten rules of this conflict, and now the whole world is on edge, just watching and waiting to see what happens next, as the international community finds itself totally divided on what to do.
Inside Israel, the language is hardline. Officials have promised that Iran will be made to regret its attack. They're drawing comparisons to the campaigns in Gaza and Lebanon. The signal is crystal clear. Israel is getting ready for more, and maybe even bigger, military retaliation. But internationally, you're hearing the complete opposite. The UN Secretary General and a lot of other world leaders are desperately calling on both sides to just pull back from the brink,
to de-escalate the situation before it spirals into a massive regional war that could draw in other world powers. A lot of countries are trying to walk a very careful middle path. India's response is a really good example of this global feeling. They're not taking sides, they've just expressed deep concern, urged dialogue, and stressed how important it is to protect civilian lives and follow international law. It's basically a plea for caution in a dangerously incautious moment. So what it all comes down to is this: we are stuck in a relentless, self-perpetuating cycle of retaliation. Each attack is framed as revenge for the last one. Israel attacks Iran's proxies, Iran attacks Israel directly, Israel vows to retaliate for that attack. And who's trapped in the middle of all this? Millions of innocent civilians.
It really brings to mind that timeless warning from Mahatma Gandhi: an eye for an eye ends up making the whole world blind. As this cycle of revenge just keeps spinning faster and faster, the ultimate question isn't really about who's right or